Recently, our nation was shocked by the horrific tragedy that occurred in Newtown, Connecticut. In response, there has been a renewed commitment to creating school communities that are safe and ensuring that our students receive all they need to learn and grow. As a member of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, I was proud to join Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Sheriff Greg Munks, the County Office of Education, and the County Office of Behavioral Health and Recovery Services in gathering local leaders and service providers for a summit entitled Beyond Newtown: How to Ensure Safe Schools and Communities. In one room, we brought together school district officials, police chiefs, mayors, city council members, public health and mental health service professionals. And at the end of the conference, 3 task forces were created to take a close look at San Mateo County's efforts to prevent tragedies in our communities. The 3 task forces address standardization of protocols, mental health services, and information sharing between agencies. What you're about to see is a panel discussion on information sharing with Janae Luttrell of San Diego and Tony Belize of Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. This discussion centers around how law enforcement, the educational community, and mental health providers can communicate to ensure that our students receive the counseling and treatment they need to prevent them from falling through the cracks. Thank you for watching.
Well, our final speakers this afternoon will be talking about the experience coordinating school and community safety between agencies and levels of government. Now, on the one hand, this may seem kind of dry, but it really has real-world consequences. 2 weeks ago, we commemorated the 6th anniversary of the Virginia Tech massacre. It's hard to remember because they all kind of meld together, but 32 people were killed that day and 23 were injured. It was indeed a massacre. And the killer was a man with mental illness who was forbidden by a state court from buying guns. But he was able to bypass background checks not once, but twice, purchasing 2 semi-automatic pistols prior to the shooting. So you start to ask yourself, well, how does something like that happen? Well, it happened because Virginia law didn't require the state court's order to be shared with the federal background check database, effectively rendering that database useless. In fact, we have heard stories in the recent months about how in the state of Pennsylvania, for instance, even though there was this opportunity to share with the national database, even though they were encouraged to do so, they had actually shared one document. So for this really to work, whether it's state to federal, local to state, local to schools, it has to be a cooperative and collaborative effort. The Virginia Tech is just one example, but it's a reminder that we need to locate these gaps in information sharing before they become a problem, because effective information sharing is more than administrative efficiency. It's about being able to prevent and respond to real emergencies. We're fortunate to be joined today by 2 mental health experts from Southern California, Janae Luttrell and Dr. Tony Belize. Each of our speakers will share their experiences, and then we'll open it up to questions. Our first speaker, Janae Luttrell, is the Director of Guidance and Wellness for Grossmont Union High School District in San Diego County. In addition to overseeing the guidance and mental health staff, she serves as the project director of a Safe Schools Healthy Student grant. Before serving in her current role at the district level, she served as a counselor at Santana High School, where she had worked since 2001, when the school experienced a tragic shooting by a 9th grade student. The shooting resulted in the killing of 2 students and wounding of 13 students and staff. Janae was charged with bringing services and programs to the school to assist in the recovery. She also serves as a member of the White House Task Force to developing the federal Strategic Action Plan on services for victims of human trafficking in the United States. Please join me in welcoming Janae.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here today, and I especially want to thank Congresswoman Speier, the Orange County Office of Education, Orange County, You can tell I'm from Southern California. San Mateo County Office of Education, the Sheriff's Department, and I'd like to also thank the Police Chiefs and Sheriff's Association for this important event. I'm coming to you from San Diego, and I'm going to share with you our journey, and I wish our journey had started with a room full of committed individuals like you have today. Our journey didn't start here. Our journey wasn't as proactive as you are embarking on today. Our journey was much more reactive. And Dr. Newman started this morning, and she put a map up of some of the school shootings, and in the corner of California, you saw El Cajon, California, and you saw Santee, California. That's where my school district lies. And we had, again, the shooting at Santana High School in 2001 that you just heard about. 2 weeks later, we had a shooting a couple miles away at one of our other high schools. No one was killed, fortunately. That student was arrested, apprehended by the school resource officer who was on site and was able to protect everyone. Unfortunately, that student, when incarcerated, ended up taking his own life. Clearly had some unaddressed and unidentified mental health issues. And also during that school year of 2001, 2002, at one of our other high schools, Grossmont High School in our district, we had a suicide cluster of 5. So we had a very harsh wake-up call as a school district, and we had a lot to learn. And I'm going to share what we learned with you today. So first of all, I want to create some context. The community that I serve, the community that I live in, and the community that I work in every day very much feels and looks like San Mateo County. The students very much look like your students, have the same struggles, the same challenges, and just like any community, there's pockets of obviously some great support systems, some great assets, and unfortunately there's still pockets of students that feel isolated, are not connected, and when they're not connected, we've experienced the extreme example of what can happen. A school shooting with deaths on campus. But what we've realized is every single day on our campuses and in our community, we have children in pain, children with mental health issues, children that are victims of various things, including bullying. And when they don't get their supports that they need, they act out in various ways. And I know many of you work with students every day who are acting out. And hopefully, together, out of today, you will develop some systems and some better ways to close some of the gaps. Because we've closed some, we still have some, and nowhere are we perfect, but we've learned a lot, and I'm honored to share it with you. So I come from Grossmont Union High School District. So my high school district, very much like the superintendent this morning, I don't get to meet the students till they're 14 and they come in as 9th graders. We have 7 feeder districts. We work with 3 law enforcement agencies, so very much what I heard here today. Again, we had 2 school shootings in 2001. We had our suicide cluster. And on top of it, we had a long history of collaboration. We know each other. We knew each other. We were working together. Child welfare, probation, our nonprofit organizations. We were doing a really good job, or so we thought. And I think we were doing a good job. I just don't think we were doing as much as we could. And part of that was because we misunderstood our limitations. For us in schools, we misunderstood what FERPA restricted us to do. We thought we couldn't do certain things because of FERPA. Our mental health partners thought that they couldn't do certain things because of HIPAA, child welfare codes, laws, all the things that I know many of you work under every day. So that's when we sat together and we said, are we really doing everything we can? Because if we are, would we have these tragedies? And could we have done anything different to prevent these tragedies? And so we had to do the hard job of looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, you see some wrinkles, or I do, and you see some things that need to be addressed. And we needed to address those things. And so the first thing we realized is that we misunderstood our limitations, or we were arbitrarily putting some limitations in place that didn't need to be there. And as Congresswoman Speier just referenced, the Virginia Tech incident happened. So we had our own tragedies, and then we had this national tragedy in Virginia, and it was a strong reminder for us of what that felt like. Because our guts, when it happens, we remember. And when the Virginia Tech report came out, it talked about the fact that there's information silos. that many people, even within the education system where he was attending school, saw risk, were aware of things, but they weren't communicating and they could have. And then folks from without the system were aware of things and they weren't communicating and they could have. And when they dove deeper, they found very much what we found as a community, that there was a misunderstanding of FERPA. There was a misunderstanding of HIPAA. None of us want to lose our houses. None of us want to get sued. None of us want to break confidentiality at the risk of whom we're serving. But we also don't want to overlay these policies and barriers that we had put in place way more restrictive than the law required. So in other words, we didn't want to be part of the problem, unintentionally. And to some extent, we were. So once we realized that and we had those looks in the mirror, we came together very much like this, although we weren't as large and I didn't have as many decision makers in the room. And we thought, then what? If we can do better and the law allows, then how can we do it? So we turned to Dr. Bernie James, who's actually a legal expert in this area. He's at Pepperdine University. We brought him in to meet with us, to mentor us, to coach us, to teach us what really can we do. What should we do? What is best practice? And he talks about having done a training, and Littleton, Colorado was in the training before the shooting happened, and how he personally has this commitment to help communities not be in the position where they knew in advance but didn't have the time or the resources to make it happen. So he really encouraged us and really inspired us. And out of that, we brought together our decision makers, and we learned we can do this. FERPA not only allows for it, they actually calls us to do it, especially under the reauthorization. HIPAA allows for us to do this. So not only can we be doing it, if you as a community go the next step and you create an MOU, an information sharing agreement that really clearly spells out how we will share information, that actually puts another layer of protection on you, and that's what we wanted to do. So in 2009, we signed an information sharing agreement. 6 school districts, 3 law enforcement partners, probation, and child welfare. And since that time, we have learned a lot. We've identified a lot of students and a lot of community issues that we would not have been able to identify, or at least not as quickly. And at this time, we're rolling it out in all 42 school districts in San Diego County, are being invited and strongly encouraged by our Board of Supervisors to sign on. As you see, we already have child welfare and probation that serves our county, and we're trying to get all 27 law enforcement agencies. So the vision is, when you're in San Diego County, regardless of where you are, this is how we do business. There's a standard of how to share information and how to protect confidentiality, but those standards are in line with the law. They're not more restrictive than what the law allows. So we as a community, we want to have a commitment to take our partnership to the next level, which honestly, that's what I understand today is about. As I've sat here today, I see the relationships and the partnerships and the amazing work that's happening, but I also see a room full of committed individuals saying, I want to take it to the next level. We wanted, again, to respect the confidentiality. None of us go into this business to violate someone's, important information that should be kept secret. However, none of us want to hold on to information or only have a piece of the picture and not see all the other pieces to understand that this is a bigger risk and that we should be intervening. We wanted to be able to work with the individual students. So when I'm on a campus or my partner's on a campus or they have someone they're worried about, they're seeing, they're hearing, they're being told certain things, they're seeing postings on their Facebook, they're having those essays written that really raise those red flags. We wanted to be able to better serve the individual student. And with the information sharing agreement, we are able to. Just last week, I was in a threat assessment where we had a student saying some very concerning things about wanting to hurt other people. And we rallied together at our threat assessment team, and we did an analysis after we've all been trained, and we were able to determine the level of threat that that student needs and how to support his family and himself as he gets the supports he needs, and hopefully prevent any violence from happening. So far, so good. And then we also wanted to look, though, we wanted to not only be able to help the individual students better, we wanted to take it to the next level. We wanted to be able to look at data. We wanted that data to be able to inform us about what was happening what could we be doing differently? Because we realized that our systems, while we tried really hard, and all of us come to work every day to do an amazing job, sometimes we fall short. Our systems sometimes have policies and protocols or systems or standards or just way of doing business that actually needs to be challenged. And we were willing as a community to challenge that. So I'm going to share with you a case study that literally came out and is something that really has continued our work in San Diego. Within days of getting this information sharing agreement signed in 2009, I got a call from one of the juvenile detectives. Janae, I'm so glad we have that agreement signed because I just picked up one of your students last night for prostitution. 15-year-old student. Now we had the agreement in place. Doesn't mean we had the answers to know what to do, but we had the ability to pull the student with law enforcement, with her probation officer, with child welfare, with the schools, all the folks that are in her life, all the systems that she works with, to better identify how can we support her. And this is what we found. She's a 15-year-old student who was a habitual truant. She was falling through our school system. She was a foster youth, and she was already on probation for her previous charge of prostitution. She was a chronic runaway, and she was clearly an exploited youth, 15-year-old. Well, since that time, we were able to work with her. As a team, we came together, so we helped her. I'm going to call her Rose. We helped Rose in her situation. We were able to identify that through all of her moves and all the different districts she's touched, she was a special ed student at one point, and all that fell away. We had lost those records. So our system had failed her. Our systems had failed her. She had changed placements in foster care. She had a long-term foster mother that had passed away. When the mother passed away, she got transferred to another school because she got a new placement. None of that was communicated with the school, so we weren't able to help her in that transition. So she goes to the new high school. She's there 2 weeks before she gets expelled. And when I asked her, I said, Rose, you were doing so well at this first school. You were getting on the average of, Bs. You were showing up. And then you get this transfer. What happened? She said, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel comfortable. I lost my mom, meaning her foster mom. So now she gets expelled. She goes to the third school. At the third school, she reported that she was in class and she was being bullied. And in her class, when she was being bullied, in her opinion, this was her perspective, she didn't feel like the teacher was intervening and protecting her. So she stopped attending class. She didn't want to attend class. Can't blame her. And so she went into the restroom so she could, hide somewhere. And that's where she was recruited by another female student, and within 2 weeks was put out on the track. And for me as an educator, it really spelled out that here we have a high-risk young person in multiple systems that fell through our systems, and our systems didn't protect her and unintentionally had contributed to her vulnerability. So since that time, we've also, out of our information sharing agreement, worked on a concept called social autopsies. And it's a real negative kind of term, but it's really accurate for what we're talking about. But because of the term, we wanted to be more strength-based, and so we named ours goals process. And it's really an oversight, a way for us to analyze our systems and link our systems. And so what we do every month, the same partners that sign those agreements, those school districts, child welfare, law enforcement, probation, we look at a risk group every month. So for instance, we looked at 30 victims of CSEC, 30 victims who had gotten involved in human trafficking. And here's what we saw, because not only could I help Rose better, but now I could look globally at a risk group, and not just within my system, but across our systems. And here's what we learned. Out of these 30 victims, 24 were known to law enforcement, many of whom had witnessed violence in the home. Most of them had 2 runaway reports before they were ever picked up for any charge. Child welfare, 29 out of the 30, and the 30th one was from Maryland, so we didn't have our records, but 29 out of 30 had more than 3 referrals before the age of 5 to child welfare. 3 of whom were on formal probation, and 21 out of the 30 victims were special ed students. So what this allowed me to do was kind of take these 30 victims, or we've also looked at gang members. We looked at students that have been expelled for drugs and alcohol. We look at a different risk group. And we as partners come together. Law enforcement will say, I'm really struggling with this group. Can we look at them next month? Or I'm struggling with this group. And we do, but we strip the names and we look at the data. And so in that matrix, I can see in the education matrix what's going on. How many of them fit a certain category? So for instance here, when I started training on human trafficking in my schools, I needed to make sure my special education staff were there. I need to make sure I'm doing special outreach to those parents because the data is informing me of the risk in my community. Probation needed to see that, wow, many of our victims to this are not on probation. However, when they are on probation, what can they do? What should they do? Law enforcement, 2 runaway reports. That told me that I needed to go back to my attendance clerks, which I did, and ask them to say, hey, when you call home and you say, hi, Janae's absent today, and the mom says, yeah, well, she ran away last night, then you need to say, then please call her in as a runaway. Doesn't cost any more, but it keeps our systems tighter, so we're able to identify, because we know the risk. We know what's happening in our community based on this data. And again, we have it on gang members, on students involved in drugs and alcohol, et cetera. So every month, this is what we do. We take 2 hours every month, and it informs us of what's happening in our community and within our systems. And in those rooms, we sit there and we have those difficult conversations. So what do you do, system, when you have this? And it's not an antagonistic, adversarial type. It's a educate me, or can we think more creatively? And so we have. And so out of the agreement, we've come up with a lot of things. One, we're identifying students earlier, we're moving on them faster, we have our partners in place. So individual students we're catching way better than we ever had before. And again, if they need a threat assessment, we're moving to that. If they need something else, we're moving to that. We're making sure we don't have redundant services. Mom is going here on Tuesday night because it's ordered by probation, then she's going here on Thursday night because it's ordered by child welfare. And unknowingly, we're draining our own resources, but we're fragmenting that family. We're having those conversations. Again, we have the goals every month, so it tells us about what's happening, and it keeps us very fast response to reacting what's happening in our community. Because by the time it takes us to see the whole picture, sometimes it's happened so long, but when we come together and I see probation's picture and I share what's happening for me and law enforcement and child welfare, we see much faster and we respond much faster. We've created curfew sweeps. We discovered that our young people, especially our highest risk students, were breaking curfew. And so we've done collaborative curfew sweeps now where it's child welfare, law enforcement, probation, opening up one of our schools, and it's my school staff there till 2 in the morning because it's our students that they're picking up. And so we come together and we have these kind of community-wide interventions where we're all collaboratively working together and sharing our resources. We've developed a whole response around commercially sexually exploited children. We've worked with our board of supervisors. We have a council. We're writing a guide for the Department of Ed right now on how to respond. And none of that would have happened without this agreement. And then we, as you heard earlier with the superintendent, because I'm a high school district, we may not get their discipline records because we want to give them that clean slate. But I have the information and the background on all the students that we're concerned about. And we don't wait till they fail in my system at 9th grade or 10th grade. We work with the partners, and if they've seen any warning signs, we're in there earlier. And we've trained my high school to not stigmatize. So when you get the student with a long record of discipline, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be stigmatized. It means that we need to help them. So we're kind of reframing this punitive approach to what we do in our community to a helping approach. And you've heard from me. One of the things that I'm going to share with you quickly is we have a DVD that we've created. It's free. We give it out. But that's not important. The important part is you hear from my probation chief and you hear from my child welfare chief, et cetera, of why they signed on to this agreement. So because they couldn't be here today, I wanted to just share with you my probation chief and why he signed the agreement and what he's getting out of it.
Hello, I'm Matt Jenkins, the Chief Probation Officer of the County of San Diego Probation Department. Throughout the county, we're fortunate to have strong partnerships with law enforcement, community-based organizations, and other youth-serving agencies. We share the common goal of wanting to support juveniles most at risk and prevent them from entering or re-entering the juvenile justice system. In probation, we acknowledge that we need our partners to accomplish this goal and provide juveniles with positive alternatives to crime. I want to acknowledge the positive work that has occurred in East Region around collaboration. The strong partnerships have allowed for innovative program creation and services that better serve and support children and families. Dr. Bernie James helped inform the region of laws and policies regarding information sharing. Sometimes the very policies and laws that have been established to protect children have also served as barriers due to misinterpretation. An interagency agreement was created and currently serves to facilitate appropriate information sharing amongst key partners. With an ongoing commitment to protect sensitive information and provide more comprehensive services to juveniles, the Probation Department has signed the interagency agreement. The interagency agreement allows for key organizations serving youth to work in the most efficient manners in the East Region. I've worked in the criminal justice system for more than 30 years, and historically probation departments have not always been good partners. The Goals Project reaffirms the power of successful collaboration.
I wish I could show you, though, our child welfare director. Her name's Pam Smith, and she happens to be the mother of Alex Smith from the 49ers, but we don't have time. But she's one of my partners I'm fortunate to work with. So thank you all. I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Blees, and then he and I will take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Our second speaker is Dr. Tony Blees. He's currently the Deputy Director of the Emergency Outreach Bureau at the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. Dr. Blees is responsible for several countywide programs and field response operations, including psychiatric mobile response teams, homeless outreach teams, and partnerships with LAPD, LA Sheriff's Department, Long Beach PD, and Pasadena Police. Under Dr. Blees, the Mental Health Alert Team provides the mental health response to SWAT callouts. The Special Prevention Unit works with federal and local law enforcement agencies and corporate security firms to provide a range of services to individuals of concern. Dr. Blees also oversees downtown Hollywood and Northeast mental health clinics, wellness centers, and full-service partnerships. Skid Row programs include Skid Row Assessment Team and the Targets Homeless Families, Homeless CalWorks Families projects, and the Center for Community Health, a one-step comprehensive service center for Skid Row community. Finally, you think you're doing a lot? Finally, Dr. Blees oversees a number of contractor-operated mental health programs in Hollywood and metropolitan area of Los Angeles. Please welcome the exhausted Dr. Blees.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll stay away from the podium because invariably then someone says, stand up. This is as tall as I am. So, we'll talk today about our field response operations because how we got to where we are was over time. And, our relationships with law enforcement are really important as they are with education. Through our Special Prevention Unit, we work with the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, the Counterterrorism Unit, of individuals of concern. They haven't hit the bar where they need to be arrested or hospitalized, but there's enough of a worry that there needs to be some outreach. And I think the part of it is that we've got some complicated people out there, students as well as adults, and it's not always specific to one entity. Sometimes it's a law enforcement handle, sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's education, and other systems, but it's important to realize that the individuals are somewhat dynamic, and we have to have a dynamic environment. Because to put it on the hands solely of mental health or law, it doesn't work, or education. But for example, some of the cases we've mitigated successfully had to do with a proper reentry to the school system. And the school system played a pivotal role in that. So, it sort of goes all over the place. But, likewise, our mental health alert team, we provide the data gathering for the CNT, the incident commander, because sometimes when the SWAT officer approaches the family member, they're having a hard time getting through that. And so it's an idea of who can do the best interview in a short period of time to maximize the data that you need to get to perform an appropriate intervention. So the day of Newtown, we started to call the families and the students that we're concerned about. Right now we have about 31 moderate to high risk adolescents and adults. And one of the adolescents, I had seen him when he was 16, he's now about 18 and a half. What struck me 2 years ago was he was just like Jared Loughner. Exactly. You know, you don't profile people, you profile behaviors. And his behaviors were very consistent with all of the things that happened to Jared Loughner. So when we called his mom, she says, you know, I knew you were going to be calling me. And thanks for calling because he's struggling. Same kinds of issues, right? So it's important to, bear in mind that this pathway to violence is sort of a stepping stone, staircase kind of thing. And if you intervene appropriately at different moments, the escalation decreases and the desire to act out decreases as well. But one of our concerns is that we are seeing younger and younger kids endorse violence as a remedy. We have, I don't know if it's in here, we have a letter from an 8-year-old who wrote, if I had an AK-47 and I were a teacher, I would take it to class, shoot all the kids, and then save the last bullet for me. 8 years old. And so you begin to think, well, you know, what's the likelihood of an 8-year-old having something like that? 3 months ago, we got a similar communication, and the child does have access because his parent, his father, is in the security business and likes guns and has an AK-47. And the kid's just waiting for that opportunity to do his plan. So, we have some challenges, and why that happens, we have our own ideas, but it's a combination of things, you know. Let's see what else is here. So, my part today was talk about information sharing, and this is just all the problems that happen, you know. It's like, first of all, I think we would all agree that we should respect our personal health information. I mean, I don't think we want to share our details like that. But we have to balance that privacy with the need to know when community safety is at risk. And as Janae mentioned, there's a lot of confusion about these things. And the fact of the matter is sometimes people confuse HIPAA with confidentiality. Therapists will confuse that, right? People confuse all sorts of things. So our remedy to that really is seminars like this, because it's a training issue. You've got very, very good people not wanting to share information. Drives me nuts. But it happens. It happens, right? And one of the things is, unless you develop these partnerships, it's not going to happen. We talk time and time again about familiarity breeds success. If I know the police chief or I know people on the threat management team, it's going to make a big difference. But a stranger coming up to you and saying, can you tell me about little Johnny? It's not going to happen. And we're fortunate that our relationship with law enforcement goes back to like the early 90s. So it hasn't been an easy road, right? Selection is important. Getting the right resources together is important, and buy-in from the top to the bottom. But it can work very effectively. But these are some of the things that get in the way. And what we're trying to do is educate individuals to the fact that you can share information under exigent circumstances when there's a risk. We work with the Secret Service. We have a couple of cases that involve a potential threat to the president, and the person lives in LA County. And it's the Secret Service, they're secret. So I know they don't tell me everything, but I don't need to know everything, right? Likewise, they don't need to know the details of the individual's private psychotherapy. But we all need to get together and talk about, well, where do we intersect relative to threat, right? Where's that threat? And what can we share that makes a big difference here? Because we look at 3 things: communications, behaviors, and dynamics. When those 3 things intersect, you've got someone that's very, very high risk. And on top, then, the access to weapons. I mean, everybody will agree that weaponry is a big, big problem, right? Even more of a problem now when you think about the Texas situation, where now individual stabbed 14 people, and you're trying to think, well, how on earth did that happen? Well, he did. And there was a recent stabbing, I think, over the weekend. So now we're seeing a drift. Maybe those that cannot get a weapon will try and do other things to get their name on the newspaper or to act out violently. But so these are our challenges. It's not going to go away. There are ways to share information, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Again, an important thing on the Virginia Tech panel recommendations, Chapter 5 on information privacy laws. These were all the different systems that knew about Sung Wei Cho going sideways, right? And if you take a look at what's happened with some of the more notorious school shooters, they were all touched by law, mental health, and education. That's the big three, right? And it goes from one. And so if you're not talking to one another, it becomes an issue. We sometimes have campus security not aware of the calls for service with the local police, right? So you got to tighten all that stuff up. And again, when they called, when HIPAA reviewed it, I tell professional staff, they said, hey, there's plenty of room for people to talk. You know, so I tell private practitioners and mental health people, don't hide behind HIPAA because it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. Get legal consultation, get the right legal consultation, because there is room to share information under circumstances where there's a threat. They also made it very clear that no one contacted the parents. Well, that's not a HIPAA violation or a confidentiality violation. Anybody can call somebody. Your son's not doing too well, right? What we're offering, or what we're suggesting to college campuses is that, you know, and that to make everybody feel better, is that during the orientation with the parental orientation, have the parents and the kids sign off then, because at that point everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. Kids, you know, kids at Harvard, sign all those forms then, and then you have it for later, right? But in the event that there is something, you can call and you can talk to the parents and find out what's happening. Again, the university's attorney, and I'm not criticizing the attorney. He made it very clear on more than one occasion when they were talking about Sung Wei Cho that they could not share information. Well, you know, 2020 hindsight, it's great. You know what I mean? The game's played on Sunday, but we come in on Monday and criticize everybody, right? But the point is you can share information. Same thing, it only applies to student records. Personal observations, conversations are not covered or fall outside of FERPA. So a teacher can call law enforcement and say, you know, little Johnny here is doing some funny things in school. You know, like he's taking pictures of people under the table, or he's calling himself question mark. That's not a FERPA violation. But again, we have all, I think, taken the extreme position. And I think we need to be mindful of either side is a problem. To be totally strict on data is a problem. To open it widely is also a problem, right? And here it is. Teachers or administrators who witness students acting strangely are not restricted by FERPA from telling school officials, law enforcement, parents, or any other person or organization. So you can call the therapist and say, you know what, little Johnny's acting out. You know, we have this with our school threat assessment response team. We'll sometimes hospitalize the individual when they get discharged. We know that they're going to a particular therapist. We'll call the therapist and say, you know, we understand you have Johnny on your caseload, and the therapist, of course, will say, well, we can't talk to you. We can't even acknowledge that Johnny's here. We understand that. But our point is, well, we can talk to you. And let me tell you about Johnny. Johnny did not spend the weekend with Auntie. He was in the hospital because he had several weapons, had a plan, and was on a pathway to violence. Now the therapist knows about it and understands that there are resources, et cetera. So it's important to share things. Again, Cho's professors, the resident advisors could have called Cho's parents to report the behaviors they observed. There's nothing confidential about that. See, but we get stuck in these things, right? And appropriately so. It's not so simple because we run into these challenges. There's an emergency exception. Disclosure information, educational records authorized to any appropriate person in connection with an emergency, if the knowledge of such emergency is necessary to protect the health or safety of the student or other persons, right? So, again, it's helpful, right? Now, will everybody interpret that the same way? Probably not, which is why we focus on threat management teams, because what you are going to try, or what you want to do is minimize the confusion, maximize the assistance. If you have a small group of people, law, education, and mental health, working together who understand the laws, it makes it a lot easier, right? So I can contact on the mental health side, mental health people, access that data. Probably a lot easier than law enforcement or school, and vice versa, right? Because trying to train everybody up, it's ambitious, to say the least. So these are the ways you can disclose information. The person has to approve it, to facilitate medical treatment in situations where privacy outweighed by other interests, such as the possibility of imminent threat to the health and safety of individuals and the public. And again, imminent threat doesn't mean that the guy's walking down the street with his AK-47 on the way to school with his map of who he's going to, it's whatever's perceived as a legitimate threat. And again, we look at behaviors, communications, and dynamics, right? Practical applications. The biggest thing are these trainings such as this because it develops situational awareness. It gives everybody a sense that this isn't going away. I've trained up all of our mental health people because I've told them, you know what? This idea that you just do therapy is sort of problematic now. Just like law enforcement making a house call. Prosenjit Podar, who killed Tatiana Tarasov, he went home after the hospital released him, and the law enforcement promised him to stay away from Tatiana Tarasov. And I tell mental health staff and law enforcement, promises don't work anymore. And you need to understand that the world is all heading towards violence, threat, risk assessment. If you have your fingerprints on somebody, you really have to spend the time making a proper assessment because the laws are real clear from risk management. If you do a data-driven, objective assessment of a potential shooter and you miss the mark, you're okay because no one can predict violence, but you can assess violence. That's what you need to do. You need to make a proper assessment, right? The other is, some of our critics will say, well, you're full nonsense. You can't predict it and you can't assess it. It's not a science. But here's the other point. With 100% degree of certainty, I can assess dysfunction. So when I've got an 8-year-old for the first time talking about taking a gun to school and shooting people up, maybe that's the time to intervene. If you look at Sung Wei Cho's history, he was problematic at the age of 3. And they maintained him in treatment successfully until his junior year where things happened. So part of it is to develop ongoing training and situational awareness because, for example, sometimes it's the cafeteria worker in the university intercepted an individual several years ago that was going to act out big time at one of our universities. He left on a leakage. He left on the paper plate, I'm going to kill somebody and then commit suicide. Had the plan, the drawings, the whole thing. She knew what to do with that, right? We intercepted a kid that got a shotgun, sawed it off for 2 reasons. He wanted it to fit in his backpack, and also in his mind to widen the killing zone by having a better spray. Went to school with the shotgun in his backpack. And fortunately, a student saw it and had been to some training on this kind of stuff and told the teacher. So a lot of this happens by other people other than law enforcement and mental health people getting the word out. It's got to be multi-agency collaboration simply because, 5 minutes, simply because without that, you're going to miss the mark. It's not always a mental health handle or an educational handle or law enforcement. It moves around. If probation's involved, if the Department of Children and Family Services is involved, they might be the ones to take the lead. And so how on earth are you going to train all of these individuals? You've got to pick a team that works together and understands things. We've made a formal agreement with LA Unified School District, Los Angeles Police Department, and ourselves, our START team. And that's the 3 that take a look at those particular cases because sometimes it goes through school, sometimes law enforcement gets a call, or sometimes we get a call. So by having everybody together, and you can imagine the school district, it's like, I think it's 700,000 people, right? And law enforcement, LAPDs, maybe, I know it's under 10,000. And our group is fairly big. You can't train everybody up. It's just not going to happen. So you have to get a small group that understands this, trains together, works together, and we review cases together. And we take a look at what's going to be the best intervention. And so we've been encouraging campuses and schools to have threat management teams. I think nowadays, a lot of people have one or think they have one, but they're not very functional. And a lot of it is practice. But this is a risk management perspective. The teacher has to have some place to send this information. Right? The campus security guy has to go one place so that he can get more data about what this kid's doing. Some of the universities have told us, you know what, I'm a professor, I'm an educator, I'm not about getting people into trouble, it's none of my business. And we've, shared again the training. Where 50% of the injured or the deceased are ancillary targets, right? Could be you, right? Also, the teacher has a very good perspective of what's going on in the class and how the student is relating to other people. We have found, we use this term called isonected when you look at the school shooters and the people that we see that get in trouble. And they're socially, psychologically, and emotionally isolated. But they're connected through internet. They spend a lot of time there. They spend more time there than what would be healthy. And that's where they research things. I'm not sure if anyone brought up Brenda Spencer. Guess not. But she, in 1978, got a rifle for Christmas from her dad. And in January of 79, shot across the street at Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego. And she was the first female school shooter. She's considered the grandmother of Columbine. But the point is, now when we ask some of our teenage students about idols and who they like, it's Brenda Spencer. Brenda's the idol. And how'd they come up with Brenda? Searching the internet on Columbine and ways to kill, they came across Brenda. So it's important when you do training to talk about what some of the students are interested in, because you have to take a look at how they spend their time. So our school threat assessment, training and consultation, that's a big deal. You've got to get the word out to everybody, as many people as you can. We do something for professional staff. We always try and get the right disciplines together. We have something for parents that's a little watered down, but it talks about bullying and other things that are problematic. Kids that spend a lot of time in their bedroom, right? I mean, it's a fad now to have a TV and a computer in your kid's bedroom, right? I had 4 kids, and I had the means to do that. I didn't do it for 2 reasons. 1, I'm cheap. 2, the more important reason is that it creates isolation. Your kids come over, you go into the bedroom, you lock the door. So a lot of the interventions we do are things like take the computer out of the bedroom, spend some time with your kid. That's not about money, but you have a lot of pseudo-parents. They take the kids everywhere, but they're not spending any time with their kids. Early screening and identification is important. We don't know if the 8-year-old that said he's going to shoot everybody up will ever become a school shooter. Low probability, high consequence. But we can assume he's got a lot of dysfunction. So let's deal with that now. Assessment, intervention. Our assessment is a data-driven objective measure. So here's another quick teaching point. A number of you have lots of experience doing this. And you may interview the guy and decide, he doesn't feel like a threat. I just don't get it. And our point is, you could be right, but bear in mind that you're not the target. A lot of people walked away from Sung Wei Cho, walked away from Prasenjit Podar, walked away because they were interviewed and they just didn't give that. I was actively involved with the Madonna case, Robert Hoskins. And, the only time he became a threat was when his security detail attempted to stop him from entering her house. That was the only time. Prior to that, they were on a first-name basis. Steve Stevens was in charge of her detail, and he'd come over and he'd say, "No, Bobby, she's not here. Okay, Steve, whatever." The only time it was different is he saw him through the security cameras throw the black bag over the gate to go to the back, into the backyard. First time, didn't approach behavior. The bag, what he was going to do was, since he was married to Madonna, was he was going to cook dinner for her, and then the bag was a kill bag. Right? The only time he acted to kill Steve was when Steve prevented him from approaching. So the whole point is, if you're not the target, you don't have those issues. And we have to be careful, as mentioned before, that the potential student at risk doesn't necessarily give you that information on the front end. So intervention's appropriate, necessary, and, well, we're good, wrap up. So, got out of that. Any questions? One quick thing that I forgot. LA County's big, right? We have 12 million people, 80 cities, about 40 different police departments, number of school districts. LAUSD is about the big one. So we average about 30 referrals a day. of a child that's at risk. And of those, maybe 10% are kids we're really worried about. And so our data-driven thing, we interview everybody we can. We look in the locker, the bedroom, the car, the computer's really important. That's where usually their stuff is. And so we access all of that because I tell my staff, you don't want to guess. You want to have as much data as possible. And then we use an objective protocol. So we have a data-driven thing, we have an objective measure that we use, and also the clinical experience and training. There was a question back there.
I'm so impressed today by everybody I've heard and all the things I've heard, and I've actually learned things that it was wonderful. I myself am from NAMI, National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, and we have a program called Parents and Teachers as Allies, and it's how to identify early onset mental illness, because what I'm trying to tell people is it doesn't happen in 12th grade. There are signs oftentimes in kindergarten on up. And this is a free presentation. It's a phenomenal presentation, and it's easy to understand. And we leave this with the teachers, and we talk to parents. And I've done the presentations. However, I have to say that the schools have been less than responsive to have us come in and teach this, whether it be because, the time, the money. I don't know how much cheaper you can get them free. It's free. But to pay their teachers to go hear it. And oftentimes I feel teachers think, hey, we have enough on our plate. Everybody's piling it. Now you want us to be a therapist. Absolutely not. It's not about being a therapist. It's about identifying behaviors. And like you said, getting a risk. But it's there. It's so easy to understand with just a little bit of knowledge. Like I learned today about, that you can actually, things I've learned today. But I myself went to several high schools, junior high schools, and elementary schools, spoke to the principal, and said, this is a wonderful program. If you'd like it, we're here. I can't tell you how it's not happening. And that's discouraging because it works. Yeah. I know it works.
There's challenges all over the place, yep. And I think that all of us in this kind of work, mental health, law, school, a lot to do, limited resources. And so that becomes the potential challenge. But the idea of keeping this alive after this conference is that we're the ones that are going to make the difference. We're the ones that are going to make the difference. And if our calls, we do, our mobile response teams go out and do all the suicide, homicide things, the 5150s. One of the things we found with the school shooters is they have a triad, the Menninger triad, the wish to die, the wish to kill, and the wish to be killed. So in the old days, we do, are you thinking about killing yourself? Yes, I am, you're in. Now we're slowing down and saying, well, have you thought about hurting anybody else? Where is this going? And you begin to see the hit list, you begin to see the planning. And so I think that it is a lot more complicated, where some of our cases would clear very quickly. Now they're 5-6 hours because it's a lengthier evaluation. But it is a challenge. It was a question.
I just wondered real briefly, what's the infrastructure and who runs the threat assessment team? Is that under public health? Where is it housed under? And who are the active participants?
It's a multidisciplinary team, and we provide external consultation to the threat management team. So a university or a school district will have a team that includes, on the inside, campus security, their decision maker, the principal or the vice principal, their HR person, their mental health counsel, and it's basically a group of high-level people that can make decisions, because you've got to decide to suspend, to not suspend. One of the things we've realized is every reaction triggers a reaction, right? So you're going to expel somebody. What's plan B? What happens when a 14-year-old, you knock him off at the knees? Where's he going to go? In some cases, it can be their final justification. So you have to have a plan about what you're going to do. And we never tell schools, don't, you do what you think is best for the student, the subject, and the institution, but think about a plan B, right? You can't cut people off. Our goal is simple. It's two things. People think I'm crazy, but I've been called other things. But one is to prevent a Newtown or Virginia Tech in LA County. And the other is to facilitate the student graduating. They have to have hope and future. You can't cut them off at the knees. I mean, where's it, what's a 14-year-old going to do at home after he's already thought that he's lost hope, he's desperate, he has no connection, and he thinks he's been humiliated or rejected? Where's he going to go? So I think it's important to realize that you got to build in some hope into these things. The way ours works is it was funded through MHSA. We're fortunate that we have already had a field response operations, and that sort of is a workforce multiplier, and we provide the external consultation. The other thing we provide to campus threat management teams is we have our database. We have access to the mental health information that someone might not have. And so we can take a look and see if this individual is known to us, if they had other issues, and if there's other things, because sometimes the therapist has no idea that little Johnny's acting out, that there's calls for service at home, at the house, or that the school is concerned about him. So I think I need to stop.
For both or either, please raise your hand and someone with a microphone will come to you.
So just to finish, the main thing is the threat management team has to represent that institution, the educational institution, and it's got to be multidisciplinary. But you've got to have the decision makers. It can't be people that can't make a decision, because it's sort of like on the go kind of thing, right?
Dr. Blees, just wanted to say that was an excellent presentation, and I want to ask you about your interpretation of the FERPA provisions, because in the university world, now wearing my dean's hat, this is a matter of extreme controversy, and it's really holding us back, I think, that we don't have the interpretation that you have. The Virginia Tech case, that kid was on everybody's radar screen, and that's the one that really makes me frightened, because if that many people could have known and couldn't get their act together, it really makes it very difficult to imagine how we're going to stop something like this. But your interpretation of the FERPA is critical here, and what I want to know is, in your opinion, how are we going to get it to be known widely that a more aggressive interpretation of what can be shared is acceptable? Because I know as a dean, when I talk to the people in our legal office, they are like, don't go there.
Oh yeah, no.
Don't go there. And my attitude is, let them sue me because student safety comes first. But that's a very unusual attitude. So how do we get your interpretation of FERPA out there? It's crucial.
True. And what we're doing is, and we have the same challenges, We'll hospitalize somebody on a Friday, definitely on a path to violence. I'll call Saturday to see how he's doing. They won't talk to me. This is a hospital. I put him in. You won't talk to me, right? So it happens all the time. It happens all the time. What we're trying to do is there's a group, and it's being coordinated by the director of the Department of Mental Health in New York, and we're meeting somewhere in Philadelphia soon. And the idea is to develop better language. It's got to be clear, right? It's got to be a lot clearer, because it's just enough of a hedge that people do what they're going to do. And I don't blame the attorneys. Here's the deal. The attorney that we have, or yours, or whoever it is, their task is to protect that institution. That's what they're supposed to do, right? And so they do that very well. But what they need is external consultation from the legal experts that actually litigate these things. So for instance, we do a lot of workplace. My bureaus like to give it to Mikey. So we end up doing a lot of workplace violence stuff, right? And the way it goes is like this. You're gonna terminate somebody, and it's a potential problem. So do you confront, or do you confrontation or carefrontation? So oftentimes the consulting now to Fortune 500 companies is, look, give the guy something. Give him $100,000 in therapy for a year. I'll tell you, every time we say that, the attorney says, no way. You set a precedent. You set a precedent, and then the external legal says, look at the consequence on the other side. Look at what happens if there's a shooting. Look at what happens. That 100,000 is not a lot, right? So the idea is we all need external consultation, right? Because I'm a psychologist. Half the psychologists think I'm crazy. They don't believe me either. They say, no. It's my license. It's not your license. So the idea is to continue to clarify it and have legal, work with legal that can help them clarify. But the other is to have better legislation given today's environment, which is, it's totally different. You know, I would imagine that a lot of you had bad days in your life, but you didn't think about taking an AK-47 to school. It's just a real different environment. I mean, and you know, we have all sorts of reasons why it may happen, but the fact is that it's a much more complicated society, and we got to find that part in the middle. You know, the extremes won't work. Opening everything up is a problem, but shutting down the hatch is even more risky.
Can I add on that too? The Fox Valley Technical Center used to maintain a database of all the state laws and the interpretation of FERPA. It's now been switched over to the School Resource Officer Association, and it's updated by Dr. James. So there's that resource for legal counsels to review, and then there's a national website, a toolkit for information sharing. It's available for legal counsels especially.
Dr. Belize, is there some quick fix in FERPA that I could introduce as an amendment?
You know, I'll be honest with you, I try and stay within my, you know, so I'm not the expert in FERPA. So I think, though, that's what we need to do, though. We need to identify key players that can push this forward, because my realm is of mental health, and I think we need to get the critical leaders in education to step up and help us split the hair. But definitely there's room for a change and revision of both the FERPA and the HIPAA. And again, they say it's there. The only trouble is people can't seem to find it. You know, it's not comfortable enough, and so I think that needs to be reviewed. Is it there to the extent that it allows a cushion for everybody?
Well, to the extent that you've already done the education to the personnel within LA, are they more willing now to come forward knowing that they've had the training versus those who have not?
No, absolutely. And I'd say we go 60 to 70%. There are still principals that are just, no, you can't do anything, right? But since we have a threat management team, we'll have the threat management person on the education side open that up. See, because you can't do it. You know, I can't possibly open up law enforcement's eyes and ears. I can't tell, yeah, you can share that with me. You'd be kidding. It's got to be, you know, a peer kind of advocacy, which is why you got to get a smaller group and train them up real good. They run the interference, because I'll tell you, I won't get anywhere with any of you. It's not going to happen, right? The schools think, what are you doing? FERPA says you can't talk to you. I say, well, you called us because your student said he's going to shoot everybody up. You called us. Yeah, but we can't talk to you. I mean, so, you know, so that's just the reality of the laws. Everybody tries to interpret them in a way that is helpful, but we have that little glitch there. There was a gentleman in the back.
Can I add on, when we got our information sharing agreement signed, part of why we made the DVD is because annually law enforcement takes that DVD and trains their law enforcement, we in education, child welfare, et cetera, because it's part of it is to get it signed. The other part is to make it part of how you do business and to keep it alive. So when people retire or people change, that it stays institutionalized as the way of doing business.
That gentleman back there had
Hi, my name is Phil Weiss, South San Francisco Unified. I've got what a lot of people probably consider a really dumb question, but as part of the educational system, we process information. We actually ask a lot of really intrusive questions, and people answer them as part of the enrollment process. Would it be worthwhile to ask the simple question, do you have a gun in your house? And if you could put that on an enrollment form and find out which students actually have guns at home, that would be an assessment tool, I would assume.
Okay. You know, we teach to professional staff interview techniques, and there's a difference between an interrogation and an interview assessment. And what we find is that when people aren't well trained in this, they'll ask the yes/no questions. And so sometimes the psychologist who's not well trained will say, well, do you have a gun? You gonna kill somebody? Well, most people say no. I go to San Quentin. I'm on the death row there, the confirmed condemned. You say, did you do it? No. No one ever does it. So I think that the part we teach is that there are a lot of things that will push for this. So in other words, we want to find out how they spend their time, what they spend their time doing. We want to find out, there's this concept called the empty vessel, and it talks about this, that what you fill yourself up with is quite likely what you're going to copy. So if I go to someone's home, a lady's home, and it's full of magazines about Chanel No. 5, she'll probably smell like Chanel No. 5. If I go to a male's house and it's fishing and fishing game and all that, you'll probably find a fishing rod or something. But if you go to their house and they have violent video imagery, they have plans, they've been researching violence, they've been researching Columbine, they think Dorner was right. Newtown, we had a young kid, he says, you know, he did the right thing. He did the right thing, that guy. Because our life here on earth is to suffer. And so by killing them younger, he actually saved them from all this suffering. So we think, whoa, right? Where's this coming from? Well, parents are believers as well. So people have, so it's important, I think, what we do in the end is that we get to those questions. Where we get, but the initial part is, tell me a little about what's going on. How do you spend your time? We ask in a hurry up, give me 5 adjectives to describe yourself. Give me your nicknames at school. The kids that are being bullied, right? They won't tell you they're being bullied, right? But you ask them, well, what do your friends call you? Melonhead. Is that nice, right? Or Four Eyes or Gimp. So I think part of the assessment is to really try and understand, because you've got a communication that he has said, I'm going to kill somebody, shoot somebody. You've got some behaviors that maybe went in that direction, but what are the dynamics? Why is it happening now? Right? Alvaro Rafael Castillo in 2008, he did a series of tapes that were in his bedroom, which is why we go to the bedroom and do a little safety check. But his videos that he did prior to acting out on the anniversary of Columbine were clearly demonstrated the amount of anger that he had to his father, who was physically abusing him, and his mother. So it would stand to say that if, in fact, someone had addressed those issues, he may have not gotten to that point. But had someone asked him point blank, Alvaro, are you thinking about shooting somebody? So the interview is real key.